Today I want to go through the basics of creating a lower third setup in Photoshop just from scratch, and then also doing one from maybe a previous design you have or a sermon series design. So we're just going to go through the steps of what I would do, how I would set it up to make it as editable as possible, and as malleable as possible, so that you can make it larger or smaller for various reasons. So if you're not really sure what a lower third is, a lower third would be, so a good example would be something like this, where you have your main shot here that's maybe from a camera feed or something, or a video, and then you can throw up this graphic to show what they're talking about. So you could do a large one like this for scripture. You could do a small one for different name options. So a bunch of different things you could do with lower thirds. So let's jump in and mess around with what we would do. So right now I just have a 1920 by 1080 graphic set up for inside Photoshop. I've dragged in just a background here so I can see maybe an idea of what would be on the screen. And I'm going to start making some shapes and layers to make a lower third. So we're going to go with a very, very basic universal lower third that can easily be changed. So first thing I'm going to do is make just a big rectangle. So I'm going to click on my shape layer, and I'm going to drag. I'm probably actually going to change that color to a black. Let's see here. There we go. And I'm going to make it pretty big for now. So make a pretty big box. And you can go off the sides. It doesn't really matter, because all you're going to see is what's on the screen. Okay, so now we have a big box. I'm going to click on my rectangle layer, and I'm going to drop this opacity to probably like 90% maybe. Let's go 85. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to draw a really thin line at the top, just to add maybe a little bit more color or interest to this lower third. So I'm going to click on my rectangle tool, and I'm going to drag it all the way across the document. I'm going to make it really, really thin, probably something like that. And I'm going to let go, and now I have this black line, and that's pretty boring. So let's double click on this rectangle too, and we will make this a certain color. So we'll just throw like a blue in here. And now I'm going to click on this layer, and I'll use the arrow keys and move that down a bit. Make sure my move tool is selected by hitting V. Move that down right to the top of that lower third. So that looks good. And now I can group these together, as this is like my main plate. So let's call this black box. We'll call this top line. And I'm going to click on these, and I'm going to hit Command G to group these together. And we'll call this main plate. All right. So the next thing I would probably want to do, this is obviously a little bit too big. This is not really a lower third. It's more like 2/3. I'm going to click on this entire folder, make sure my move tool is selected up here, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm holding down shift so that it stays locked onto that plane, and we'll go maybe about right here. So this is going to be set up for a scripture option. So now what I want to do is take my text tool and make a text box. So that I can add some scripture to it. So I'm going to hit T on the keyboard, and that's going to give me my text tool. I'm going to click somewhere over here. I don't want to go right here, because I don't want to be right next to the edge. So if I did drag this out, and now I have this text in here, I'm way too close to this edge. So projectors or a TV or something might cut that off, and that's not what we want. So I'm just going to delete that really quick, and I'm going to make a text box maybe somewhere. I want to give myself a lot of buffer on each side, so I'm going to even it up somewhere around in there. That looks good. And now it gives you some placeholder text. Let's just put a verse in here. I just have a Genesis 1 through 3. I'm going to copy that. I'll come over here, and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to scale this way down because it's way too big. So let's go to my character panel, and we're going to bump this down to maybe 12. We'll go with that for now. Let's change the font. Let's do something nice and clean. Montserrat. Maybe ultralight. Let's do light, and we will scale this down even more. Let's go maybe 10. All right, so that's good enough. I'm gonna remove this number. Okay, this looks fine. I'll highlight all of it, and I can do all your character editing inside this character panel. So I'm going to stretch out my vertical spacing there, something like that, maybe a little smaller. All right, so let's just go with that for now. So now I have my main text layer, and then I'm going to make another text box, just clicking and dragging, and we'll just type in Genesis 1 through 3. All right, I'll probably make this a different weight, so I'm going to highlight that and click on my option for weight, and we'll put something nice and thick here. Okay, I'm going to move this over. So again, when I'm moving this over, I'm just kind of clicking. If I have my text turned on, you can take your mouse right out to the outside where you get that move tool icon, or you can just click off your layer, and with your move tool selected and your layer selected over here, you can move that around. So we'll stick it somewhere over here. Again, I don't want to get too close to the edge just in case it gets cut off. So something like that. All right, so that looks pretty good. We could add maybe a little bit more color to this. I could add another box, so maybe throw this in here. We could make like a scripture box or something. I'm gonna drag this below Genesis, and we can change that color maybe to that blue. For some reason it wants, there we go. Okay, so, nothing too fancy. It's pretty basic. Maybe you could maybe turn this one off. You could add a nice little line over here to add to your text. As far as the design goes, that's totally up to you on what you want to do. You probably don't really need that, but it's totally up to you. So let's just go with this for now. All right. So again, I want to make this very flexible. So I'm going to throw my Genesis and rectangle. Actually, let's click on this and put verse box. And I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to highlight both of these and hit Command G to put it in a box. And we'll call this reference. I'm trying to make it as organized as possible because most of the time you're going to have a bunch that you have to make. So we have our reference, we have our verse. We'll just keep this one open for now. And that looks pretty good. So let's say we have this ready to go, and your pastor turns in his notes and he adds 3 more verses to this. Instead of having to, I guess you could lower the size of the font or whatever. We maybe just want to make it a little bit bigger. So this is obviously a lot of text. This is going to be a little bit tricky. So let's say he throws in some more text. So I'm going to click over here, highlight it, and he does, instead of 1 through 3, he does 1 through 5. Now we have tons of text. So I'm going to kind of cut down on some of these spaces here. Remove some of these numbers. All right. All right, so now we have tons of text. We probably will need to drop this size down just a tad bit. I don't want to go too small. Let's just try 9. And then we can maybe tighten this up a bit. Okay, so let's say it's about this big. And then, so the reason I made that box really big in the beginning is because I want to be able to just quickly and easily move it up. So I'm going to click on the main plate, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to slide my box up. So I don't want to go crazy high, maybe something like that. And then in the beginning, I can click on that entire verse and slide it up there as well. So that looks pretty good. Running into some issues down here. You may need to go in and adjust your text box some. You can maybe slide it down, do all of it over here. You could, click on some of these lines here and bump them down to the next line. However you need to do it. It will all be different based on what your scriptures and fonts and all that stuff is. So that's just a quick way to easily move your box around and keep everything all together. So I would then throw all of this into a folder. I would call this, verse 1. And now I can quickly just hit Command J to duplicate that folder, turn this one off. So now this is my next verse, and so on and so forth. So now you have all your different iterations saved and ready to go. All right, so let's mess around with a very basic lower third for a name slate. So I'm going to use pretty much the same layers I have here. I'm just going to duplicate these to change them up. So I'm going to delete this first one, turn this back on. So I'm going to take these 2 folders. I'm going to go ahead and throw those into a folder. So now I have my scripture option, and I'm going to duplicate that, Command J, and I'm going to call this name slate. All right, I can turn the scripture off, and now I have my name slate ready to go. So I open this folder up, and let's mess around with a different layout. So we have our black box, and again, you can, since this is a shape layer, you can transform this all you want, and it'll keep its quality. So we're gonna move this. Actually, I'm gonna make it pretty long and pretty skinny. Let's go with that. I'm gonna take the top line, and I'm going to move it down. So I'm going to hit V on the keyboard and just slide it down. I'm going to line it right up with the corner of that box. So somewhere around there, that's good. And then we can take this entire main plate folder. I'm going to just move it down here. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the verse 1. I'm going to open this folder up, and now we can change the name of some of these things. So instead of reference, I'm going to put title. And I'm going to go to this scripture here, and we can just put in a name. So I'm going to grab my text tool, click on top of the text, highlight it, and type in pastor name. I'm going to bump that size up, maybe 13. Let's go 17. All right, that's good. I'm going to make this one pretty bold. Okay, and I need this to be, this text box can be a little bit smaller. Drag that down here. Okay, and we have our title that we now need to adjust. So I'm going to open up this folder, click on the verse box. I don't need it to be this thick, so again, I'm going to hit Command T to transform that. I'm going to stretch it to make it pretty small. And again, this is a generic build for lower third, so it's nothing fancy. So I'm going to stretch this out pretty large. Okay. Then I'm going to click on here, and we're going to change this to whatever the title may be. Pastor title, campus. Me and my spelling and typing skills. Okay. Highlight that. Let's make it a bit lighter. Go with just regular for now. Stretch this out. So I'm going to drag my text box way down here. Make that a bit smaller, maybe 8. That size out there. So, okay. So now I have my name and I have my pastor title or campus, my like subheading or subtext. I'm going to drag this and put it right down here. Actually, know what you should do, what would be probably smart, would be to take your text tool. I'm going to make my text box again, and now I'm going to highlight this. And I'm going to right justify it. So I'm going to click on the right one, slide this down. I'm going to keep it right on the edge of this paragraph here. Okay, so now that fits nice and neat. Same thing with the pastor name. I'm going to move this down maybe here, highlight it, and do the right justification. And we can maybe add a little more space there. There we go. All right, so now you can make this entire thing, this entire name slate, quickly and easily as far as the size goes you need. So let's say you have a short name. Say it's like my Alex Smith. It's not my last name, but now it's small. I don't need this super long lower third. I can click on the name slate and I can slide it down and put it down here. Probably actually will make my title a little bit longer like that. That's probably what I want to do. So now I can take the name, slide it down, have a nice lower third ready to go. And that looks pretty clean, pretty simple. But now let's say you had, you could duplicate this entire folder, and now you have a small one ready to go. Or if you want to just keep this nice and clean, you can just say, oh, they want to put in a website, so I need to drag this out here and type in my website. Something super long. But now it's aligned right here just with the side of the lower third, and it's ready to go. Check it out, whatever. So now you can quickly grab your entire folder and just move it to wherever you want it to go. So with lower thirds, you want to make sure that you save them as PNGs. So I want to make sure I turn this layer off, and then I can right click, and you can tell it's still a little transparent there. I'm going to go to File and Save As, and then I want to save it as a PNG, which is right here. And that will give you that transparent background. And you should be able to put that into ProPresenter or whatever program you're using and be all set. So the thing I'm going to do next is I'm going to save this. And in the next video we're going to do is talk about how to animate this if you do want to get into some animating lower third. So we'll just save this as, I'll just go to desktop and make a new folder, call this tutorial. Okay. And we'll call this basic LT. Put that in the tutorial folder. Save it as a Photoshop file. Yes, we want to do that. Save. Okay. So let's say you have a series that you've already done, and you need to design a lower third around it. How would you do that? So I have one opened over here. Let's go to the main design. So this is a design I've been working on or actually it's been done for a while, and I want to add it to the site. But this was the final design, so I need to make a lower third out of it that matches. And the final came out to be here are the options. So I have this name slate lower third with some of the elements from the design, as well as a scripture lower third, again with some of the elements over here. And it's pretty much the same thing we did with a big box and a nice thin line at the top for some color. The only thing different is that it's not really transparent, and it has some of the same look and fonts as the main design. So let's talk about how to make this. So what I would do is, once I was done with my main design, which is usually where I start first, is make sure you organize it. So I've broken it into deleted folder layers I didn't need, name things that I needed to name, put them in folders so they're all together, and then I'm going to group all that in a bit once I get into the lower third to make it as easy as possible. Okay, so let's just save this as, we'll go to that folder, desktop tutorial, and we'll call this messengers LT. Okay, so I have my new document ready to go. The thing I want to do first is sort of isolate this background. So how I'm going to do that is really turn off layers that I don't need right now. So I don't need this shadow. I don't need these clouds that are on the wings. I don't need the actual wings themselves. Some more clouds, I can turn those off. Some dust, or at least there's just some little dust particles in there. Turn that off. The title can go for now. More clouds. I'm really just trying to get down to this background. So there's more dust layers, turn those off. Color highlights. Now these are layers that I have up in the corner. You can see they're kind of shining. I don't really think I need those necessarily, but I could just move those down maybe here, because I want to isolate this background and not have some layers on top that would show through when I export as a PNG. The color correction we can leave up there because these are just adjustment layers and they're not going to affect the transparency. So that looks good. I've gotten all these things turned off, and now I want to just draw a box around this and make a really big box with a just kind of cut out. So I'm actually just going to turn these off for now, these color highlights. They're not doing enough to really notice. I'm just going to turn them off. Got a sky overlay in the background. I want to keep all this together, so I'm just going to click on both of these folders and group them again. We'll call this main BG. All right. And again, the way I did it is I click on both of those folders and hit Command G to create a folder. So I have my main big background folder. So now I want to just draw really a clipping mask on top of this box. I don't really want to cut it out necessarily. I don't want to draw or rasterize it or anything like that. I want to keep as much as I can intact with all the different layers that are involved in this. So I'm just going to draw a clipping mask. So to do that on a folder, you just draw your box that you want. So I'm going to click on the marquee tool up here, and I'm just going to take this entire section right around here. I kind of like having some of these shadows that are down by the floor. So we'll make it pretty big. All right, so once you got that, you have your marching ants going around the box. And with this layer selected, I can click on this clipping mask button down here, and it will make a big square lower third. And now we have the transparency in the background. So this will be like my main plate that we kind of made earlier with the basic one. So I'm gonna hit V on the keyboard with my move tool. I'm just gonna click and drag it down. So now we have this big box, and we can move it, we can make it bigger, we can make it smaller, whatever you need to do. So I'm gonna do the same thing earlier with the line. I'm actually gonna turn on the title so I can see that gold color I want. So I'm gonna click on the box, click on the fill color, and with the color picker open, I'm gonna click and get that gold. Hit OK, and I can make a nice thin gold line. So I'm gonna move it down right there. I could put it inside this if I wanted to. I guess I could throw it down here. And if I move it down just on top, I don't want it, if I go too high, it's going to get outside of that clipping mask that we made. So I just want it right on the tip there. There we go. So now we have our nice big background plate. We can just call this plate. And it's ready for scripture. So I would take my, it's this font that I'm using here. So let's see what the font it is. Hit T on the keyboard, Click on that and it tells me it's Eimfell English. So I'm going to turn that title off for now. Click somewhere over here and I'm going to make my text box. Clicking and dragging with my text tool, and I can paste in that same verse. Highlight that. I need that to be dark. So again, with the properties, you can do it in properties, you can do it in the character panel. I'm going to click on color and make it a pretty dark gray. I want the spacing to be way down or kerning, and that looks good. I don't want center justification, I want left. And I can take some of these verses up here, remove some of these letters. Let's just take out this verse 5 for now. Highlight that. Get some space in between these. You want to make sure it's really legible from far in the back if you have a big room. So that looks pretty good. We might could go a little bit smaller. Oops. Or sorry, a little bit bigger. Oh. Let's just change this to 11. And maybe space that out just a little bit more. There we go. So again, plenty of room. I would rather, it's probably smart that you would make more lower thirds than jam a bunch of text on top of a lower third that's hard to read and just looks sloppy. So this looks pretty good. So the next thing I did is I took that title and it's kind of ready to go. So I would just put my title right down here, and I'm going to turn off the Christmas. Don't need that one. Don't need that small black one. And I can really just delete those all together. Okay. So I can take my title, we could call this reference, and I can just drag it down here and it'll be ready to go. Maybe scale that down. So if I want to scale that down this entire folder, I'm going to hit Command T and take my mouse right to the corner of that box, click and drag it, and we'll hold down Option to scale it from the middle. And we could leave it, off the side, or you can have it, that gold box come from the side, whatever you want to do. I think I actually did it from the side and then I stretched it out. So here I have a clipping mask on it. Let's see if I can move this. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's not do that. Maybe move this down some. I'll just turn this off. All right, so now I have a nice, just turn that whole thing off. Let's scale this up. And obviously this isn't really part of the tutorial. This is just part of my design that I'm having to tweak. So again, I want to try to keep everything in a folder to make it nice and neat. So now I have a lot of room to play with. I can click that marquee tool. Oops. Click and drag to make sure I have a nice big box. So if you have, a large scripture reference, you can have plenty of room to play with. All right, so now it's ready to go. So once that marquee is drawn, and my folder is selected, my layer selected, I can click on that clipping mask tool and it will make the box. Another option, if you do need to, and this will come in handy later for certain projects, is to hold down Option and then click on that box, and it'll do the opposite, which is kind of cool. Okay. All right. So that looks good. Let's put on our scripture reference. One through 4, I think. And that looks good. I'm going to scale this back a little bit, maybe 250 as far as the kerning goes. Drag that in here. I'd put that probably all the way to the side, and then I can just take my entire folder based on what that reference is and drag it left and right. That means I'd probably also want to left justify it so that it's always against that side of the gold bar. So no matter what I have to type in here, I would have plenty of room, and then I can just, based on what the reference is, I can drag that down. Okay, so let's add a little bit more interest to this project. We had some cool wings that we could throw in here, so let's click on the wings folder. And what's cool is these are a transparent layer that I've cut out and thrown in here, so we could put them really wherever you want. I think I just had it over here. Just add a little bit more interest to that lower third. Maybe put it over here somewhere. I don't know, they're kind of big. Maybe even have it sticking off there, which is kind of cool. So if you have some elements like that, try to use them. Just don't make it, keep it classy. Don't make it too cluttered and too messy. Just make sure it sticks with the overall design that you have working. Then we can start messing around with any of these other pieces that we have. So we have some clouds we could throw in here, which is nice. Some Some little dust elements, more clouds. These things are kind of cool. Have them overlay some of the text a little bit. Again, tasteful and not distracting is what you want to go for. All right, so that would be the lower third for the main scripture option. And I guess I don't really need to go into what I would do for the name slate lower third, but let's take a look at it real quick. Again, I did the same, really the same principles that I've already kind of covered. So again, I isolated that background to make a nice big background, and then so you can see it here. So it's a really big background, and then I drew a really long lower third. Again, I was going to keep this one very very thin. Oops, I want to make sure my marquee tool. Just want to make sure it's really thin, and then I click on my clipping mask, and I'll have that box right here. Drag that down, and I did the same thing with the gold plate. So I increased the size of that little messenger's nameplate, and just how I did the reference, I just made a same thing for the title. Threw in the few elements in here to add some interest, and that's really about it. So I put all the wings and stuff inside of the folder. Looks like the shadow, maybe. See some of the shadow down there. Getting some weird shadows from somewhere else. Not sure where that. There it is. Dust layer, apparently. So it'd always be good to test your lower third. Maybe throw in an image back here to make sure there's no other random particles or textures or layers popping up. I've had it where I've made all the scriptures and lower thirds and then loaded them in, and then I saw some random drop shadows and stuff like that. So maybe double check your work. So that's how I would. That's usually how I build out lower thirds for based off a old design, and then even something very basic like this one here. So the next video I'm going to go through if you do want to mess around with how to do some simple animations for your lower thirds. So check out the next video where we talk about how to animate these just a little bit. Thanks. Bye.